Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of This is Islam. I'm Kai, and in today's episode we look at the prohibition of offering prayer when the sun rises and sets, basically when the sun is on the horizon. There are several authentic hadiths scattered throughout the hadith literature. The following from Sahih Muslim are just a sampling. I'm quoting the hadiths from sunnah.com, so excuse the stilted language and bad English grammar at times. Quote, He, Muhammad, said, "Observe the dawn prayer, then stop praying when the sun is rising till it is fully up, for when it rises it comes up between the horns of Satan, and the unbelievers prostrate themselves to it at that time. Then pray, for the prayer is witnessed and attended by angels till the shadow becomes about the length of a lance. Then cease prayer, for at that time hell is heated up. Then when the shadow moves forward, pray, for the prayer is witnessed and attended by angels, till you pray the afternoon prayer. Then cease prayer till the sun sets, for it sets between the horns of the devil, and at that time the unbelievers prostrate themselves before it." End quote. As indicated in the slide, there is a footnote to this hadith provided by Adil Salahi, who translated and edited Imam Nawawi's commentary to Sahih Muslim. His footnote reads, quote, "This is because Satan stands parallel to the sun, so when it rises it appears between the two sides of his head. When a believer prostrates, Satan deludes himself that it is for him and that he is being worshipped. God's messenger has forbidden us helping Satan with his delusion." End quote. The next hadith, quote, "Ala bin Abdul Rahman reported that they came to the house of Anas bin Malik in Basra after saying the noon prayer. His, i.e. Anas, house was situated by the side of the mosque. As revisited him, he, Anas, said, 'Have you said the afternoon prayer?' We said to him, 'It is just a few minutes before that we finished the noon prayer.' He said, 'Offer the afternoon prayer.' So we stood up and said our prayer. And when we completed it, he said, 'I have heard the Messenger of Allah saying, this is how the hypocrite prays. He sits watching the sun, and when it is between the horns of devil, he rises and strikes the ground 4 times in haste, mentioning Allah a little during it." End quote. And the last hadith, quote, Abdullah bin Amr reported, "The Messenger of Allah said, the time of the noon prayer is when the sun passes the meridian and a man's shadow is the same length as his height, and it lasts as long as the time for the afternoon prayer has not come. The time for the afternoon prayer is as long as the sun has not become pale. The time of the evening prayer is as long as the twilight has not ended. The time of the night prayer is up to the middle of the average night, and the time of the morning prayer is from the appearance of dawn, as long as the sun has not risen. But when the sun rises, refrain from prayer, for it rises between the horns of the devil." End quote. There are exceptions to praying at these times, but the preceding is the general rule of thumb. Basically, avoid praying at these times. Now let's take a look at Imam Nawawi's commentaries. Just a side note before I get into reading the commentaries, be aware that the English translation by Adil Salahi references hadith numbers established by him for particular reasons he explains, so they don't match up with the numberings provided by Dar al-Salam and Sunnah.com. But it's pretty straightforward to locate the material in the original Arabic of Imam Nawawi's corpus for anyone interested to consult it directly, and one can verify that the commentaries I cite do indeed reflect the hadiths I cite. Imam Nawawi comments, quote, "The Prophet says, 'Do not make your prayer at sunrise or at sunset, because it rises with Satan's 2 horns. This is how the hadith is expressed, with Satan's 2 horns. In another authentic hadith, it rises in between Satan's 2 horns. It is said that Satan's 2 horns mean his followers, and it is also said that it refers to his main force and the spread of his corruption. However, it is also said that the 2 horns mean the 2 sides of his head, and that the hadith should be understood literally. This is clearly preferable. It means that Satan brings his head closer to the sun at these times so that those unbelievers who worship the sun and prostrate before it will superficially appear as if they were prostrating themselves before him. Thus, it appears as if he and his offspring have clear power and that they can confuse worshippers and spoil their worship. Therefore, Muslims are discouraged from praying at these times so as to keep prayer safe from Satan's falsehood. The same is the case with prayer in places frequented by Satan. In Abu Dawood's and An-Nasai's narrations of the hadith concerning Amr ibn Abasa, the hadith says that the sun rises in between Satan's two horns and the unbelievers will be praying to it. End quote. Elsewhere, Imam Nawawi comments, quote, "The Prophet denounces the way a hypocrite prays. He says that a hypocrite sits down watching the sun. This is clear criticism of delaying Asr prayer without a valid reason. Then the Prophet says that hypocrites pray when the sun is in between Satan's horns. Scholars differ concerning the meaning of this description. Some say that it means exactly what it says, and that Satan brings his horns parallel with the sun when it sets and when it rises, because worshippers prostrate themselves for it at these times. As Satan shows himself parallel to it, the worshippers of the sun appear as if they are prostrating themselves before him. Thus, he deludes himself and his friends with this impression. Other scholars say that the description is figurative, and that the expression his horns refer to his power and dominance over some people. Al-Khattabi said that the expression gives a simile, which means that delaying Asr is the result of Satan's attempts to stop people from offering the prayer, in the same way as a horned animal tries to stop its opponent. The correct interpretation is the first one." End quote. In yet another location, Imam Nawawi comments, quote, "The Prophet gives the instruction, when the sun rises, stop praying, because it rises in between the two horns of a devil. The Arabic word for horn is qarn, which also means century, community, etc. Hence, some people suggest that the hadith is referring to the devil's community. However, An-Nawawi says that it is better to stick to the apparent meaning of the hadith, which is the sides of his head. What the hadith thus means is that when the sun is about to rise, Satan puts his head in its way, so that the unbelievers who prostrate before the sun as it rises appear to be prostrating before him. Thus he and his followers may have some power that may enable them to confuse a person who is offering his prayers. This is the reason for the ruling that prayer is discouraged or reprehensible at this time." End quote. Just a side note, why Adil Salahi translates the commentary in English to say An-Nawawi says is baffling. The commentary is Imam Nawawi speaking. The context in Arabic is Imam Nawawi talking about what is being said, qila in Arabic, which is the past passive of qalla, basically narrating the prevailing opinion of scholars. Now, notice that Imam Nawawi, in all these commentaries, is very consciously aware that people interpret Satan's horns in a non-literal, figurative way, and he dismisses all these understandings. Imam Nawawi is crystal clear in multiple instances that the preferred understanding is the literal one, namely that Satan is physically present on the horizon with his horns, literally. Just to be clear, Imam Nawawi isn't doing some sort of tafwid al-ma'ana or tafwid al-kayf. he is saying that the normative Muslim position is to affirm that Satan with his horns is literally on the horizon at the specified times. Or perhaps Mohammedan Muslims saw an eclipse and thought that was a physical manifestation of Satan. Remember, Imam Nawawi said the two horns mean the two sides of his head and that the hadith should be understood literally. It's remarkable how an eclipse can make the sun appear as two horns, and that it can occur near or on the horizon. It now starts to make sense why such a scientifically sophisticated society in 7th century Arabia concluded that Satan literally appears on the horizon with the rising and setting of the sun. It's almost as if one could use physics to calculate when such a phenomenon would occur. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Next time on This is Islam, I will discuss the Jerusalem Qibla, that Muhammad and early Muslims prayed towards Jerusalem, something that was such an integral part of Islam that Muslim scholars can't agree if it's even confirmed in the Quran. Stay tuned.